What's happening, guys, and welcome back to another Sunday Scan. Hope that everyone had a great week, great weekend, and we have an action-packed week ahead of us. We have the election, we have a Fed meeting, we have the SMCI earnings update, so just so many things going on. This is a week to focus in. So to get ready for that, we're going to review some charts on the first half, and then later on, Judah is going to share some of his main watches. I'll share some of my main watches, and we'll get going with it. So the first chart that I really wanted to review was this DJT. So this has been on watch for a while, especially in Investors Underground. Nate has been trading this like crazy, and a lot of other members and moderators have also been trading it. So I just want to review a couple of like the lessons from this, review the chart, and then we'll get ready, for the week ahead and see what could be happening next. So first, there's a couple of terms that I really want to discuss. And the first one is the term capitulation. And I've mentioned this before, but that's a term that means to formally surrender. That's where the word comes from. And so capitulation is the process of shorts basically all covering and longs going, all in. It's kind of like this process where the exact point where there's max longs and there's the minimum amount of shorts, that's kind of where it comes together and capitulation happens. So there's a couple things that I look for when you're expecting a capitulation. And one of them is the rate of change from the prior trend. So if you look over here, you can see that we've had other trends that are very clean in DJT. And so when you have a trend that is, staying within its range, and then it really starts to speed up, so it varies from the trend, that is one sign. The other sign is volume. You can see that the volume in these squeeze, situations often mirrors the actual price action. So you can see the increasing green volume, the increasing green candles, and then you have that capitulation, the max volume, all the shorts get blown out, all the longs get sucked in, and you have a level looking left here. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prior areas where this has stuffed into it in the past. And so you kind of have that confluence of things coming together where you have a trend start to speed up, you have the volume increase, and then you have that capitulation into a level looking left. And this is just such a clean example of, so many concepts coming together. And plus you have, this was like the theme was running into the election with some of the speculation there with the betting odds. And, what we talked about last week on Scan is that although you can have these things, run into the actual event themselves, many times they'll get ahead of themselves and kind of do that capitulation or that blowout beforehand. So we were expecting a parabolic up and then stuff and then a mean reversion trade. And that's exactly what we got. So just a lot of lessons from this. And you can see, the personality of the stock, how it's had these similar, big moves, these big capitulations, and just so many lessons from this. This is really a chart worth going back to and studying. And, different styles have different ways of playing this. The options were very expensive, so the options were a little bit more tricky to play. But if someone was, shorting or, longing on the way up, there was huge amounts of range on either side. But I think it's just good to study this pattern of kind of an options runner, an equity runner, a squeeze theme, an upcoming event, and then you had that formal capitulation or that surrendering of the shorts, and then into a level looking left, and then you can see that the volume mirrors the price action. So just a lot of lessons from this. And then, of course, this will be somewhat on watch for the upcoming week because, who knows if we get a big bounce or a total round trip with the election. But DJT is a name worth paying attention to in this market. The next one was SMCI. So, talk about another big range mover. We've been talking about, seeing bearish flow on this on the option side for a while. And I discussed that doesn't necessarily mean that, there's bearish news coming, but it usually means that there is some kind of news coming and someone either has a huge, long equity position and they're hedging it with puts, or they can be making a directional bet. If they have huge amounts of puts being bought, they're expecting, some kind of, news or some kind of event to justify that unusual purchase. And we're not talking about, a million or $2 million worth of like options. We're talking about like massive, tens of millions of dollars worth of, option flow into things. So SMCI, in case you haven't heard, had its auditor resign over some accounting differences. So there's a couple of scenarios that could really be causing this. And one of them is, it could be that, quote unquote, like fraud alert, where it's like, are all the accounting things screwed up, and were they fudging the numbers? But oftentimes what happens is that there's like a practice or a policy in place from management, and it usually has been in place for a long time. And then it's not until someone actually digs in and does like a deep dive audit that they find that something has been, counted wrong. And so that's probably what the dispute between the auditors and the company is. And so the auditors left, and that is a big red flag because they can't file certain things like the 10K. You'll have it get dropped from different exchanges if they're not meeting regulatory compliance things. So you basically just have all these layers of demand from the index, from funds, from analysts are not able to cover it anymore. So you just have all these levels of demand basically dropping off, and that can cause a huge problem. And if they don't get this resolved, then the company can get delisted off of exchanges and go into the pink sheets and things like that. So SMCI is good to review because a piece of news like that is so significant, especially to a big listed stock with a lot of institutional ownership in it. But then it's also worth mentioning that in situations like this, you have to pay attention to what is the key driving variable, and that is the auditors are not able to audit. Okay, and so when we're watching this, and I'll cover this more on the main watches, but you really want to be on the lookout for headlines of does another auditor step up? And if so, then all that negative pressure from this company basically assuming the worst case scenario where all the market participants, most of the longs have dropped out. There's a ton of shorts. There's a lot of people banking on this on the downside for good reason. But you have to know what is the key driving variable. And if the main thing is just they're not able to find an auditor, or there's something wrong with the accounting, then if you have a headline where you have an auditor step back in or someone takes a review, you could have a massive bounce back up to, from 25 or so all the way up to, 35 or 40, which would still be a very significant move, even though it's kind of just back to where it was. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, and there could be huge problems, and this could, totally round trip. But, as you're approaching areas where, these are like round trip areas where basically where the stock came from. So it's good to pay attention to when you have, kind of that reverse capitulation, the huge volume increasing, and then, going down into a level. It's not to say that the technicals matter so much with this, it's headlines matter. And if the headlines and the technicals line up where you get a headline that, a new auditor is stepping in at the same time that, looking left, you have that support. It's just like the reverse of DJT potentially, where you have that capitulation into a level and you could get a huge bounce. And, it doesn't necessarily mean a long-term reversal, but it could mean a bounce back up to, could be 20-30% or so, and that is a huge move to capitalize on potentially. So for right now, the thesis is SMCI has huge problems, accounting issues, they're going down, but you have to keep an eye on for the headlines. And if a headline like that drops, you could have a massive bounce. So just have your head on a swivel for both scenarios with something like SMCI. TNX. So this is like the 10-year treasury note. And sometimes I'll mention bond yield, sometimes I won't. But I mentioned it in the room on Friday how, just rising bond yields can put pressure on stocks. And so when you have something, again, it's in a steady trend and it starts to speed up a little bit. These are levels basically, coming back to like when the Fed was still, raising rates and doing things like that. And part of the reason is that as you have some election speculation, your people are anticipating higher deficits, more borrowing, and potentially some inflation coming back. And so you basically had rates go back up to, close to levels where the Fed is currently at. And so that's just something to keep on watch that, as bond yields rise, it can put a cap on stocks for a little while. And then we'll see if into the election, if that's like a sell the news kind of thing. You could have on election day or afterwards, you could have a huge mean reversion in yields, and that could be, potentially positive for stocks, or it could be a better play with bonds and things like TLT, where you have, the bond ETF is inverse of the yield. So as the yields go up, that means the bonds are going lower. As bonds are going lower, it means yields are going up. And so one way to play this, and I'll go over this in the main watches again, I'll just touch on it quickly, is that you could have that kind of capitulation down move in bonds, and then maybe around the election you have a big bounce or some kind of mean reversion trade. But yields are worth paying attention to, especially how they affect equities and stocks in general. CVNA, another, this is a big earnings play, and we've been watching this one for a long time, and this is turned into a huge turnaround play. And it's kind of been amazing to see just like the rise and fall of this from the 2020, 2021 speculation crashing all the way down. People think that they were going bankrupt, and for good reason. The financials were terrible, very shorted, and it got down to a couple of dollars. And then since then, the management has somehow been able to keep some growth going, keep the business afloat, and then they're showing some profit and some revenue increases and a positive guide up. So you can just see it's a very similar move to what happened on the downside. Is just reversing. And so if this was like the unwinding of the trade and, bad forward guidance and bad growth and bad margins and everything, and then it stabilized here and then those factors reversed, that's just a good thing to keep in mind. And then, again, when you have moves like this, once they start to speed up from a prior trend, that's usually where you have those mean reversion trades. And I think Stan was on CVNA this week, and he has some really nice trades on it, anticipating that mean reversion trade. He's using the same tricks that we're talking about. You have some kind of a trend in place, you have some kind of event, it starts to speed up from prior trend, and then if it starts to stuff into a level looking left, or if you have like an end of the week kind of thing, if you have some options come into play, then you can have that mean reversion type of trade set up. So CVNA was another big mover off of earnings. MSTR, kind of same type of deal. They announced that, they're basically going all in on the Bitcoin thing. It's, big shocker. Master has been all in for a while, but, they're doing huge potential like equity raises, fixed income raises, and they're basically going to take all that money and pour it into Bitcoin. And this is good to know or understand on both sides of the cycle. So while Bitcoin is in an uptrend, while we're in like a reflation cycle, and while certain risk assets are doing well, this is a strategy that works really well. It's similar to using like leverage, in like a strong trend or something like that. It amplifies it. But you'll get to a part of the cycle, and it might not be for months, or it could be a year from now, where that same exact thing will unwind in some ways. And so just how like CVNA, we saw like the big unwind, and then like the factor stabilized, and then you had like the upside move. You could have a very similar thing in MSTR, where now it's on like the reflation kind of thing, where it's going straight up, it's using leverage, it's going all in Bitcoin, and that works really, really well and amplifies gains while the market is going in their favor. But at some point, due to Bitcoin's volatility, due to global events, or it could be anything, Bitcoin is known to have those 20% down days, and it can have, moves down 80% from the peak. And I'm not saying that I'm not expecting something like that, and this probably wouldn't be for, months or possibly a year, but, Bitcoin's volatility lends itself to huge moves, and something that is very leveraged to the price of Bitcoin can have those outsized moves to it. So just like you're seeing, these crazy outsized moves on the upside, just keep that in mind for months from now or a year from now, when you have some factors start to change with Bitcoin, when you have some factors start to change with this, and you can anticipate that huge, symmetrical kind of unwind down that could be hundreds of points. And whether someone's playing that with options or with stocks, you could use that to estimate your range on the way down as well. So MSTR is just a really good, kind of cyclical leveraged play on an underlying asset to study and to keep in mind for both parts of that cycle. VSTE, so this is a nice one that we had on watch in the room, and this is a classic liquidity trap. They had a positive news catalyst. You can see that first day, huge volume, and then the second day, the volume dries up, price just kind of stabilizes, and then the volume comes back in, breaks those prior highs, and then it had an outsized move. And honestly, liquidity traps usually don't have range this far, but you can see that this went from 250 or something all the way up to 8. So that was a fantastic move, and I know that a lot of people in Investors Underground capitalize on that. So if you are looking for setups, if you are looking for a place to find great stocks, great commentary, and a lot of good people trading these things, join Investors Underground, because you will find all of that and more in there, plus all the technology and everything. So Um, those were the stocks that I really want to recap for the week. And now, before we bring on Judah, and Judah is going to share some of his main watches, I will give the disclaimer that neither Judah nor I are financial advisors, and these are not buy or sell recommendations. This is for informational and educational purposes only. So let's bring on Judah to share his main watches. Go ahead, Judah.
Thank you, Chris. So what I got on watch for this upcoming week, starting off with AVXL. Pretty much, we had news on Thursday, and Friday held up pretty well. If we go into the hourly here, we could see how well it's building and holding. So, I'm keeping an eye out for any rebuild of seven and maybe this breakout and continuation. Similar kind of look and situation is a PLBY, which had some decent volume here, over 100 million, and then we started holding up day two. If we go into the hourly again, we could see it's building. I'm looking for that, any trend to join off open, any continuation for that continuation and breakout. Had some decent PRs out and volume, and it's holding pretty well. So I'll look to join anything there. As for DJT, the volume is just insane. Election day, Tuesday, November 5th. What I'm looking for here, the only way that I would take this bounce at this point is really if it gets to the 23, 25 levels and kind of really soaks and builds off there. But what I really want to see is just a gap up. Either Monday we get a really nice gap up, unexpected gap up and continuation, or maybe we have that, Monday fail, 23, 25, even 28. The 28 level is pretty big level as well, but I have some levels in mind to see, whether it soaks, and then maybe Tuesday we get that big gap up and reversal, or even after the elections would be preferable. But I want to see a real gap up before getting involved, because I don't know when this sell-off will end. So, yeah, any reversal. I mean, I'm still keeping an eye on this. This has been a 350% move off the lows, and now we're pulling back about 45% as of now. So, I mean, pretty aggressive sell-off 4 days, pulling back almost 50% here, while it's been grinding 350% over the past month. Then we have LUNR, which is holding up pretty well. Pretty much just looking for any sort of continuation and breakout, um, you know, over these trend lines and levels. Just keeping an eye out for, some sort of continuation and breakout. UAVS, I mean, the volume's almost completely drying out now. We pretty much have this, we have this, uh, had a little bit of a pause over here between these 2 days. It was halted. It also had a 1 for 50 reverse split. So the float is pretty low. The market cap is very low. We had some great volume recently. We had a decent sort of, pickup from the 150s to the almost the 380s, fours. And now we're just slowly floating down, volumes drying up, continuation squeeze to the upside. INDO, kind of a choppy looking chart here, but I'll be looking for, some sort of breakout through this little pivot here. Maybe we get a, 420s push, any break and build and soak on that level. I'll be looking to join there. MIRA, not so excited. Just I'll be keeping an eye out for that 2 level if it decides to reclaim and soak and kind of build off there. IBRX, I'm also looking for some sort of reversal here. Anything over Friday's highs of like that 535 level, maybe we get some sort of bounce. And then RDDT, I'm looking for some sort of delayed reaction, maybe over the 114, 115 level. I'll be looking for that continuation. And then another sector that I kind of want to go through really quickly is the China basket. Just a few names that I have alerts for is, Futu, which is kind of just building here. We have that 9870s. or if we even, build something out here. I mean, we kind of had the pretty much a 9870s, EH coiling, 1750s, BILI right over this, 2250s area, and then TAL over that 1125s. But just looking at how tight, some of these China names are getting, I want to keep on monitoring them for some sort of reversal back to the upside. And that is, what I got for the upcoming week.
All right, great. Thank you, Judah, for sharing those main watches. And I will jump into some of mine, and then we will wrap things up. So the first name I have on watch, and I already covered, kind of part of the thesis, is SMCI. So what I'm really going to be looking for is that while I expect more downside, I'm looking for that headline or that capitulation to possibly cause a bounce. So I'm going to be looking at these levels in the low 20s. I want to see the volume kind of capitulate, and really what I want to see more than anything else is some kind of headline about auditors, being able to find a new auditor or doing something that is going to reverse that key variable. And it might not happen. If they don't announce a new auditor or anything, I fully expect this to be delisted and to go to the pink sheets and do everything like that. But the magnitude of the bounce can be so great if they have that one headline that they find a new auditor or there's some kind of resolution coming, that it is worth having on watch. Like up here, like as the headline drops and everything, all the magnitude is to the downside as that gets repriced, as all the demand falls away and everything. But you get to a point where as you're coming up to key levels and you have, possible news catalysts coming up with like their earnings update on the 5th, I want to start to, back off from the short bias, and I want to start to flip my bias for potentially looking for that bounce. And if that, if the news isn't that great, and if it bounces quickly and it stalls out, then it could be right back to a bearish thesis. But the magnitude, in my opinion, might favor a bounce at this point, just if you have that headline. So that's going to be on watch for calls for me. If it gets down to these levels and you get any kind of headline. But you have to be quick with these plays. And so, again, Investors Underground, you're going to get the news before basically anyone else, as they have all the AI data scrapers and all the people in the room who are, news traders are going to have that out within, a second or two of the news dropping, as opposed to 30 seconds or a minute later, whereas you could already have a halt up and the move could be, starting to get priced in. The next name I have on watch, especially with the upcoming election, is going to be Tesla. So as we know, Elon has been, involved with this cycle, and I think that it'll be an extra sensitive name to the election results. And so I think that if you have more of like a Trump win, then Tesla will have like another tailwind at its back. They're involved with a lot of regulatory things, and I think that if he's involved in a more favorable policy environment for him and his company, then that would probably be a net positive for Tesla. And if Harris wins, then I could see that being a net negative. And so I think you could have some significant range either way. But I think Tesla will be one of the big election movers. And again, it's not politics related. We don't care. We're trading the environment and the news. So this is on watch for either case scenario, and I think it could have a maybe 10-15% move over the week as that is announced, if not more. The next name I have on watch is TLT. We already talked about this, so this could be a big mean reversion trade into the election, in my opinion. I think since some of the odds favor Trump at this point, at least in the betting markets, who knows if that's reliable or not. I'm not, trying to make a case either way there, but I think that if kind of a Trump is odds are being favored, that could be like a run down into that. So basically people are expecting higher spending and, higher inflation, things like that. So I think bonds are really selling off on that. And I think that almost regardless of whether or not Trump or Harris gets in, I think just after the election, you're going to have a big jump in this. And again, it might be short term, it might not last, but I think that for the upcoming week, you're going to have some big moves in TLT. So that would be, possibly bonds going up and yields going down. The next name is Apple. So Buffett announced that he and Berkshire sold more of their positions. So they went from having a couple $100 billion of it down to 70 billion or something, a measly 70 billion. But so Buffett's been, selling out of this, and there could be a couple of reasons for this. Could be fundamentally driven, but you also have to take into account that Buffett is in his mid 90s. His partner Charlie Munger just passed away last year. He's in a different cycle of his career where he just wants to have a ton of cash around, for anything that happens if something were to happen to him, if something were to happen to the economy. So I think they have close to a couple $100 billion of cash on their books now. And if they can earn, 4% or 4.5% in the bond markets doing that, then it's not bad. If you have $300 billion, you're earning 5% on it. You can earn $15 billion a year in a relatively safe manner. So it's not like they're just burning cash, losing out. It's like they actually have some cash that they can generate from staying in cash. So I think it's just a strategic move from Berkshire at this point, especially over the next couple of years. I think they're going to have plenty of cash in there. So if something were to happen to Buffett or something were to happen to the economy, they could either buy back shares like crazy, or they could make a big acquisition, or they could do something with the cash. So, but that being said, as he's selling out of Apple, everyone's going to think that it's just because of a fundamental reason. And so it could be, Apple is a behemoth. It's been slowing down a little bit. It's still reported good earnings, but, it's not quite the young buck that it used to be. So I think you could have some potential downside in Apple, especially if the markets get volatile after the election. This could be a go-to name, because if Buffett's, maybe he's done selling, maybe he's not. Maybe there's another 20 billion that needs to get sold over the next quarter. So we'll see what happens, but Apple will be on watch for me. And then CVNA, kind of same type of deal, where it's, I think, as you had this move speed up after its earnings, and it was positive earnings. It was in the right direction, at least. But we'll see that if the markets get volatile, this might get repriced back down, maybe test 200 again. But if the markets are ripping, then this will probably be a leader. So it would just be kind of resetting that trend, and I would be looking for a trend at higher and then a mean reversion trade. So most of these names, again, you have so many big events coming up. You have to have a plan for two scenarios. If something lines up, if you have a good read on it, great. If not, then trade something else. And then GLD, so gold has had a huge run, especially coming up into the election, and the same kind of situation as bonds, where you could have a big move coming up, possibly with a mean reversion trade. So much of what goes on with gold is kind of like a global equity hedge, or a global hedge to markets and uncertainty and fear and elections. And, you just don't know. And there's so many asset classes that react well to elections and react poorly to elections and monetary policy and Fed stuff, that gold is kind of this like uncorrelated, well, I don't want to say uncorrelated, but it's a different asset class that serves a different purpose. And so if you had this big run up into the election, then you could have some kind of big mean reversion trade. Maybe election night, it spikes a ton, but then maybe it mean reverts all the way back. So gold will be on watch for me. And then MSTR, similar deal. We talked about this before. If election results go a certain way, if you have Bitcoin ripping, Master will be at the head of that pack. And then if something goes wrong, or if you have a bad headline, or Bitcoin corrects a lot, I think Master will be one of the most volatile movers to the downside as well. And we even saw that on, I believe, Friday, where there was some really nice trades, some mean reversion trades. And Nate was talking about even like zero dated options or things like that can be a great way to play these things, where if you're wrong, if you size correctly, if you're wrong, maybe you lose half or 70% of the investment. So if someone puts in $1,000, $10,000, whatever it is, that's, you're set risk kind of going in. But if you catch one of these moves correctly, it can go 5x, 10x, 20x. So some of those situations make sense when you can get cheap enough options, when you can have a good read on something and it has enough range. So that's just something to keep in mind. So those are all the names that we had on watch, and a big thank you to Judah, who shared his watches a little bit earlier. And so big week coming up. Try to stay as unbiased as you can in the markets. And for me personally, I'm saving mental capital, I'm saving energy, and waiting for these big events to come up, because again, you can have some moves that are so large that it could make a quarter, it could make a year in trading. And so instead of trying to trade every single thing, focus on things with magnitude, focus on things that are going to have range. And with so many upcoming events, I think that you'll be able to find something great to trade. So we hope to see you in Investors Underground. And then just a final note is that Trading Takes just released its panel episode. So when we were in Vegas at Traders for a Cause, I was on a panel moderating a panel between Nate and Greg Shabika and Pradeep Bunde and Stan as well. So a great panel, expert traders all sharing kind of their thoughts and their advice of like, someone's trading journey. And we compared it to like the hero's journey of just going through the process of setting out to do something important, like feeling that call to adventure, finding mentors, struggling, hitting rock bottom, finding edge, making it out the other side, and then being able to give back in some way to other people and to help people. So it's just a fantastic conversation. It gets emotional at some point, and I think it's just very relatable to every trader in every stage of your life, whether you're newer or whether you've made tens of millions or hundreds of millions, and someone's coming full circle in that route. So I encourage you to check out that new Trading Takes episode on YouTube, and we look forward to seeing everyone and trading together in the week ahead. Take care. Thank you for watching Sunday Scan. Be sure to check out other content put out by Investors Underground, including interviews, podcasts, educational material, and more. Thank you.